Hello and welcome to ThisConnect. A lot of you asked, how do you keep a vehicle so that for a long term it stays easy to drive and ride? Karthik is here to tell you there's nothing to worry about.
Yeah, I thought this time you were gonna do that, man.
I'm your support system.
Asha,
You say don't worry, I say he's right.
don't worry about it.
Yeah. I'll tell you when you need to worry about it. If your vehicle was from the 60s and the 70s and you were living in the 1980s and 90s, then yes, there was something to worry about.
There's a lot to think about back then.
Yeah. When you started driving and riding vehicles and you had vehicles in your family from the beginning, was maintenance easy?
So when I was a kid, early school years, we had Ambis and Fiats and all of that. Of course, that time maintenance, not just long-term maintenance, all maintenance took a lot of work.
Yeah.
It was a regular feature, right? We used to live in the middle of nowhere, so getting care for the cars was always a problem. And so a lot of the work used to happen at the house. The mechanics used to come home and do whatever work for the cars there. And it was a regular feature to see cars being worked on. Whatever's happened, something's gone wrong, somebody comes, fixes it. It was all the time. I mean, you would see it on a regular basis. That changed. And I remember that as a thing because when the 800 came, that kind of stopped.
Yeah.
We didn't see it after that. Until then, it was seeing Fiats, Ambis, we had the Jeeps, whatever, all those, they were always being worked on. Something's gone either for a repair or whatever. But once the 800 came, that went away.
Correct.
And since then, it just changed.
It was exactly that. So we had an Ambassador, a Mark II, I think. And then we had the 800, which we bought used. And the amount of work that went into the Ambassador, we were expecting to do that for the 800 and that just sort of never happened. I mean, we didn't actually worry about the 800 until a cow jumped off a median and landed on the bonnet.
Oh, man.
And then it had to go for repairs, which was great because then we got to paint the car from that ugly brown color that it came in to a white color. But outside of that, I don't remember the 800 requiring much work at all.
Right.
After which I think that got the accent. Remember the soft first accent, which also, I mean, for all its built-in flaws, whatever they were, but it didn't really require maintenance outside of service, really.
Correct.
And on the 800, I remember right after we bought it, I took it to Maruti service and they looked at it and they said it's full of things that we don't recognize as OEM parts. They had a list of things. They said, we won't service your car until all of these parts are changed. Yeah, okay. How much will it cost to change it? 2,000 bucks. Oh, you're eating my head for 2,000 bucks. Dad? And no phone call, no mobile phone. So went to the service advisor's office or whatever, called dad from there and said, I'm asking them to change all of what's wrong with it? Nothing's wrong with it. You just need the OEM parts and then we'll service it. And we spent that money once. And then
So why didn't they have the OEM parts?
It was a used car and they must have done something.
Acha, okay.
So after we changed that, we never touched it again. I mean, you basically open the bonnet, check the fluids and you're good. And it basically ran.
Right.
And also I had 1980s, 70s motorcycles, right? I had two RD350s, right before which I had a Kinetic Honda and a KB125. The KB and the Kinetic didn't need much work. But I became great friends with my mechanic because the RD350 was constantly needing a little bit of a tweak, a little bit of a tune, something or the other was going on with it.
So back at the garage, when we used to work on bikes, RD350s and Bullets were like kind of banned. You only took them in for service if they were friends. Otherwise, everybody else, you would deny them because it was just too much work and required work too frequently. Like with the Bullets, it was always the push rods jumping off the cams and invariably having to adjust that. RDs, it was the points, having to adjust the carbs, the timing, all of that used to take so much time. It used to constantly keep going.
Correct.
But everything else, like, scooty peps and this and that coming in, bring it in, service it,
and send it back.
It's done.
Yeah.
If anything goes wrong in that, okay, there's something wrong with the CDI, this, that. It's just replace it, done, move on. There was really nothing to fret about. Whereas with the RDs and Bullets, it was like recurring pain.
Yeah.
They keep coming back.
Yeah, and a lot of it is also, I think, perception. Okay, so in business standard, we had a Honda City 1.3, I think, or a 1.5. I can't remember now. But there was a story that we wrote about how the Tata Indica at that point of time was not proving to be niggle-free and unreliable, etc. But the Honda, for example, was, and separate stories appeared in separate places. And one of the people on the floor, a very senior journalist called Mr. Jagannathan, he took great objection and he used to live in the same area as we all did. She says, what is this? My Indica is as reliable as your Honda, but my Indica is always being pulled up and your Honda is... And we's like, your Indica is reliable, please tell us more. So Mr. Jagannathan says, I only go to the mechanic on the weekend. And whatever minor things are there, he just tightens those screws, puts the beading back in place or whatever, and then it is done. So we had to explain to him that to us the idea of reliability was the Honda's bonnet wasn't open till it was due for service because it just ran. And it was at that point that it became obvious to Mr. Jagannathan that going to the mechanic on the weekend, every weekend, was not what reliability means. He didn't even know that this was not the pattern.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think
that must have been a step up from whatever he was driving earlier, what he would have had
correct.
earlier. So
yeah, it's a perception.
Yeah.
Right. So a lot of people today still worry saying if I don't take care of my vehicle, something will happen. But the probability of something happening is falling and falling and falling. Think about it like this. I remember renting a ambassador with a driver, a taxi. We were going to either Shimla or Manali or Nainital, one of the three, I forget. And it was anticipated that we would have to stop at some point. And it would either be the brakes overheating, or it would be that the engine will overheat, or it would be that there would be kachra in the fuel along the way somewhere, and that kachra would clog a line at some point of time. And duly, it was the kachra which was the reason we stopped, because that is the most complicated way. So by Murphy's Law, that is what had to happen. And we were on Shimla. So we were on the side of the road looking down at the toy train, looking at the scenery, playing around while the car was dealt with. And it took 4-5 hours to deal with this car. And nobody in that group, us the kids, the parents, the driver, the mechanic who was found to help, nobody thought that this was an unusual occurrence.
Right.
They thought, yeah, this is completely normal. But in 2024, when you remember there was a jam going up to Lonavala from Mumbai on the expressway, and various vehicles had clutch issues, and various bonnets were open, and that was a big deal, saying, it's just bad driving.
So this exactly that. I used to live in Khopoli, right? So we used to go up. So I grew up there. So the getaway used to be to go to Lonavala, Khandala. Halfway up the mountain was a stopping point where all the cars used to park. They used to top up the radiator water, let the cars cool off and all of that, so that they could complete the rest of the journey without issues. That there was a space made for that, and that was normal. And and back then, even for us, like summer vacations, we used to go down to Nagpur where the rest of the family was. So we used to drive down in a convoy. So the entire family used to. It was absolutely normal. And this is the simplest of things. The one thing that you could count on happening multiple times was tire failures.
Correct.
You would have numerous punctures. Every car, you would stop for one car. So minimum in a day, we used to make it a 2-day journey. And every day you would have at least 2 to 3 punctures. So we as kids used to be very excited. That puncture, okay, can we do it? Mount the jack, jack the car up. And we learned all of that then only. Okay, how to do it, what's the right place to do it, and all of that. And that one simple thing. Today, look at our state of tires.
Correct.
Like we have had this discussion about, I'm not so worried about tubeless tires, etc. Right? Versus tube type. It's not such a big deal for me. Agreed. There is a safety factor with tubeless tires. But at the same time, the chances of failure have gone down so much, even in that one simple thing. Your rims, the tires that have been made, they are so much more robust.
And
everything.
And road conditions have improved.
And okay, so again, same, going back to the drive to Nagpur. So when Siran was much younger, like he must have been maybe 2 years old, he was still in a child seat. We drove from Pune to Nagpur at least 2-3 times. Vanita, Siran, me, just 3 of us. I think once was a Figo, once was something else, once was an Indica. So we've done that without even thinking. Without any hesitation. And the roads back then, and this I'm talking about 10 years ago, even then, that the road to Nagpur, for the most part of it, wasn't great. A lot of it was like state highway.
Right.
Not great condition. Shoulders used to be bad. You'd get potholes. I remember one time I lost a tire on the Figo because that pothole was like a crater straight down in. There was no way of dodging it. So it was bad. But did you think about it as the normal condition that, hey, will the car make it?
No.
Do I have to worry about tires? No, you just got in, drove and said, okay, you just have to be slightly careful because you don't know the road that well. That was about
correct. Yeah. So my father-in-law's favorite story about how the vehicles used to be unreliable back in the day is that he and mom-in-law, they used to live in Mumbai, in Juhu, and they would go to Lonavala on the weekend. And Lonavala roads were narrow; it was a steep grade and all of that. He says, so in the boot of the Premier Padmini used to be a wooden block. It was part of the original equipment. And it was mom's job to run out of the car when they came to a stop and put the wooden block under the wheel so the car couldn't roll back on the slope. Because he said, because if I sit there with the brakes on, then they take longer to cool down, which is the point of why we stopped, to let the brakes cool off. So my dad would drive and he said, Meena, get ready. And then mama would jump out and put the brick under the wooden block under the wheel.
Yeah.
And that was included in the equipment, like with branding on it. Like it was like a
Padmini.
Padmini or Fiat or Premier, I'm not able to remember, but the wooden block was branded.
Oh, wow.
Can you imagine that today?
That sounds almost modern luxury now.
Yeah.
You get a little chalk with it, which is branded, made out of pine wood.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Stick the wheels.
Yeah. So, and today I think you have a recent Hayabusa, you've owned a couple of KTMs along the way, you have that Mercedes-Benz, which is under restoration, so you'll ignore it. You have the Ignis. I have a bunch of motorcycles and I've cycled through, let's say, 8 or 9 motorcycles in the last 10 or 15 years. When was the last time you worried about the maintenance of these from the view of saying, I'm going to keep this vehicle for a long time, I'd better take care of it extra? Have you ever done it?
No.
You're such a careless owner, man.
No, I don't think it's careless. I mean, a lot of people can think of it as careless because of the way we use our vehicles, because they're not spared in that sense. But the point is, I think what's important is the timely intervention for things that are needed. That is, I think, the key point in all of this. Long-term maintenance will not be an issue if timely maintenance is in place. Regular interventions for things that are needed, like doing your service on time. Sometimes earlier if needed, because if you are using your vehicle hard, I would take that care of saying, I'll switch the oil out earlier than needed, right? Those simple things. Not waiting for the chain to completely wear out so that the sprocket is completely gone, that the chain is completely worn out, so the experience dies out. Do it early.
Or doing the chindigiri of saying, okay, the chain is worn, so I'll keep the old sprockets.
Oh man, no.
Which makes no sense to me.
No, not at all. The kit goes. So those kind of things I think are more important to keeping the vehicles healthier for longer, rather than saying we get to a point where things start failing and then we start taking care of it.
Correct.
So long-term maintenance will become simpler if it's just timely and regular. Modern vehicles.
I think the bigger view of this is the world has changed. So it's more welcoming of vehicles today. So in terms of most Indian highways, despite what we think about our roads, have hard shoulders now, and usually paved shoulders and marked, which means that the truck trying to overtake another truck on a narrow road and causing a pothole on the edge of the road to get deeper and deeper and deeper until it's actually dangerous. It's very rare now, at least for the primary highways of this country. Our roads are cleaner and better surface than they used to be. And yes, there is ground to cover. We have potholes and stuff to deal with. But by and large, we've come a long way from that. So the reason why a car would break, for example, or a motorcycle would suffer have reduced. Second, because you have dual carriageways separated, 4 lanes and all of that, it's also less wear and tear on a vehicle to drive. Because if you remember back in the day when there were narrow 2-lane roads with no divider, there was a lot of extra acceleration, braking, etc. because you just keep trying to find an opportunity to pass whatever was ahead. And you would basically be thankful for a truck letting you pass because they really didn't have space to let you pass either. So in all of these ways, I think first, the environment in which the vehicles are operating, no matter how tedious and onerous they feel to you, is a better environment than it used to be. Then the quality of the vehicles has improved. And that's at every level. Metallurgy, engineering, the idea of what will break when also is fairly well understood. And to a manufacturer's perspective, they don't want everything to stay reliable because then they can't make money from it. So some of it will break. But it's not like everything will break. Whereas back in the day with an Ambassador or Fiat, it was very real. You wouldn't really know what would be your next expense. And I think the biggest thing you can do for a vehicle today is to start saying, okay, I bought it. Let me download the user manual. And then keep the service maintenance schedule separately and easily available. Right? So I use Dropbox. And on my Dropbox is a folder called Bikes. Each of my bikes has a folder, and one folder is just manuals and parts catalogs. And it's the full manual and just the maintenance schedule separately, so that I don't have to go to the end of the manual to look up the service. It's a 2-page PDF that tells me what happens next. In the Ducati's case, which is a complicated motorcycle, I will usually ask the dealer to give me a PDF of the jobs that are in this service. And it varies, okay? So a regular service might be 5 items, 10 items. But a Desmo service is 2 pages of items, for example. But I am aware of what's going to happen. And then you do logic, Kartikeya's logic. I'm about to take a long trip. Let me give my vehicle fresh fluids. Let me not make it last the fluids that have already been in this vehicle suffering and wearing out or whatever. And then at the end of the trip, I will give it fresh fluids. You need them now when you're going to put the lot of strain of that extra travel. Before the rains, check your tires. Don't say, oh, I think they'll last the rains and then change the tires. These are just common sense. And honestly, you don't need much more than this.
I think there is, on motorcycles, like we've discussed, there's a lot that the rider has to be in tune with the machine for it to just work.
Yeah.
There is sensitivity to the machine is an inherent part of that journey.
Yeah.
In that also there are a lot of tweaks. I mean, like, let's say adaptations or understandings that you can build. But I think in the case of cars, long-term maintenance becomes a key question when you really aren't in sync with the machine.
Yeah.
And that is the one thing which I find troublesome at times, because you'll see people who are really not using the machines well enough.
And that's on both sides. Babying it too much and abusing them too much, both. It's not only aggressive and bad driving. It's both sides.
Like, the simplest thing is the clutch. For most people, a clutch should last at least 40,000 kilometers.
Yeah.
If you are handling it well, it should last you that well. I've heard of people stretching it much further. I've heard of people finishing it much earlier. So that is in sense of how well tuned you are. So long-term maintenance also can vary depending on how you use them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So suspension getting short. So these are the things that how you use the vehicle, how you tune yourself with the vehicle can change what long-term maintenance means. Long-term maintenance can come closer to you or can go further away from you. So getting that sync is also very important. So getting to know your machine so that your vehicle is healthy and enjoyable is important. And in this, for cars and even for motorcycles, we've had the good fortune of having good people taking care of our vehicles for us who understand what is needed when.
Correct.
So like, for instance, fork oil changes.
Yeah.
It's not to be seen, chal raha hai, kya farak padta hai, right?
Correct.
But those are important things. They may not be seen. You may think it's okay to skimp on that or just getting those things done. But they make such a big difference. And this is something we've spoken about in our podcast about when do you upgrade, all right? If you just do a few things on your car, on your bike,
Correct.
you can get that new feeling again.
Yeah.
So long-term maintenance of these things. So for instance, changing shock absorbers, bushings, getting the greasing done, all those things can just changing tires can refresh the feel of your vehicle.
Correct.
And in long-term maintenance, for me, those are some of the things that I'll always look for, because the clutch, the engine, those things you will get done because that's absolutely critical.
Correct.
Because without that, I am in trouble.
Yeah.
These are the things that people will skimp on.
Yeah.
Push.
So, correct. So how I approach this beyond the maintenance schedule and all of that is I say I ride pretty fast. And I need to trust my machines to be able to ride pretty fast. Okay. Our perspective is informed by the fact that you and I, we both get a lot of new vehicles from manufacturers because we are testing new things constantly. So we have a very clear sense of what new feels like. And I would like all of my personal vehicles, no matter how old they get, to be able to feel like that. And you remember that engines wear out really slowly, but tires, they wear out really quickly, comparatively speaking. Fuel wears out really fast, which is why if you ride a lot, you'll be at the petrol pump every, let's say, 5 days if you're filling a fuel tank. So there is an order in which things wear out, and you just have to be aware of that order. So because I ride fast and I want to trust my motorcycle, to me an annual brake fluid flush and refresh is a given. It may not be required. And my mechanic might say, sir, even if you do this every other year, you'll be fine. I still want it done every year. How much does brake fluid cost? 300 rupees. I say, I don't want .4. I want 5.1 because I'm a fast rider. I use my brakes aggressively when I need to. What is the upgrade cost? 200 rupees. Right? My clutch, the hydraulic clutches on one of my bikes, .4. Put that 5.1. You don't need 5.1 for a clutch. So I would rather have a higher boiling point than a lower boiling point. And since we're discussing 200 rupees and this is my pride and joy, I'm going to ignore the 200 rupees. Please upgrade my. Right? It's happening to my KTM right now. The At 40,000 kilometers, the radiator fan finally gave up.
Mm.
I went to Zubin and I said, it's overheating. The fan is running very slowly. He said, we'll change the fan. Now, Zubin, unfortunately, is on my side in the sense of let's not spend Shumi's money. So he didn't do what I would have actually told him to do in detail, which is change all parts of this system. This system has existed for 40,000 kilometers. It's done a fantastic job. The radiator itself doesn't need any help. But let's just proactively do all the hoses. Let's change the thermostat. Let's change the fan because we're going to do that anyway. So that we know that if any breakage happens in the system, now it will be the unusual thing rather than a wear and tear thing. We didn't do it. And because we didn't do it, it is still overheating slightly.
Okay.
But if I'm going to keep this vehicle, it's my pride and joy, the 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 rupees that this is extra on the time scale that this vehicle will be with me for doesn't make any sense. You might as well just spend the money. Fork oil changes to me should be done annually if you take your vehicle seriously. Motorcycles. Cars are much harder to do. But fork oil should be done every year. Rear suspension should be serviced every other year. Not because some maintenance schedule says, it's because that's how my control is transferred to the ground. So I want fresh tires, I want great brakes, and I want really, really good suspension. And it's not complicated to do, and honestly, it's not that expensive.
Yeah. It's really not complicated. That's for sure.
Yeah, these are all, you give the bike for a day and a competent mechanic in a day and a half will turn all of these jobs around.
So the interesting thing about this is a lot of them are rubber parts.
Yeah.
Right? So that's the thing, whether it's tires, whether it's the hoses, all of this, the bushings, all of that are rubber parts.
Rubbers and plastics, yeah.
Yeah. So the age over time shows. You will not see it as, oh, it's failed.
Correct.
But its efficiency, how well it's working, all of that does start to deteriorate. And at some point, you could have a failure. Like, for instance, actually with the 124, Perseus, he's a friend and he's the curator for the Mercedes-Benz Classic Car Rally. So he's really into the Mercs. And when I got the Merc, you know what he told me? Don't worry about a thing. The car's bulletproof. You can just use it.
Just do the rubbers. Yeah.
All he said was change the hoses. Get all the hoses changed.
Correct.
Get the beading for the, for the windows, for the screens, all of that. He said, get that. The day you decide to do up the car, change that.
Correct.
That is the one thing he told me. He said, rest, don't fiddle with it if it's working.
Correct.
Imagine that.
It makes total sense.
30 years old or something.
Yeah, it makes
like
total
that.
sense.
And that was his only advice.
So Chotu, my mechanic in Delhi, said exactly the same thing. He said it's an RD350. It's 30 years old. Okay? Don't worry about this motorcycle. When it stops, we'll fix it. Until it stops, we won't intervene.
Yeah.
Let it make any sound it wants. As long as it is running as hard as you want to, as long as it is braking as hard as you want it to, as long as suspension is not in your way, don't touch it. And then that happened. Went around a corner and it just felt weird. Like a deeply unsettling kind of weird. Dangerous? No. Just my connection went to the motorcycle and then my connection came back.
Swing arm bushing.
I went to him and I said it felt weird. He says, if you can feel that already, because I was a new rider at that point, I was like 2-3 years into riding. He says, if you can feel that already and you have such a deep-seated conviction something is wrong with the bike, I am telling you, you'll be good with motorcycles in the long run. Your swing arm bushes are gone. And he went straight, and I think in a day and a half, we had new bushings and the bike felt magically better.
Yeah, superb. Sorted.
Right? So, to me, we are belaboring this point because honestly, it is a very simple thing. Get a connection going with your machine so that you can sense what it is wanting to do, what it is not wanting to do. And if it was able to do it and now no longer able to do it, then you have to figure out which components could possibly contribute to that situation. And in the order of how it goes, rubber parts age the fastest. Plastic parts age a little bit slower, but they can be brittle, so you need to see if they're broken or not. And then comes the hard metal parts where usually loose nuts and bolts, worn washers can cause problems, after which comes actual mechanical trouble, which is fortunately for most brands today extremely rare.
When you were talking about paying $200 more for oil for the dot 4, it reminded me of a friend. He's taken things the other way. So he used to have a Maruti Ertiga, right? I'm not going to name him, but his thought process was crazy. He said, I know that Maruti has designed these engines to run without oil also. Because they know how end users use these vehicles, they don't care. once they're out of warranty, most people don't even take them to the service center. They'll get it done outside because they want to get it done cheapest. He said, if they say oil changes every 10,000 kilometers, I will do 20,000 kilometers. I know that it will make no difference. And his Ertiga actually ran. So if you want a bad example of how robust these vehicles are, there are people have tried this, but in his case also, in his defense, he was also in tune with his vehicle. So
Correct.
he said, I am pushing the envelope, but I want to see what happens. His idea was not to save money per se, but to see how much can I stretch this, because they say 10,000 kilometers, 6 months. Back then it was back then it used to be 5,000 kilometers in 6 months. And now the interval is up to a year and 10,000 kilometers. So his argument in one way was valid, that I know that this can be stretched. So everybody's increased the service intervals, right?
Yeah.
So his argument was like, I know that this can run. So he used to actually he loved his car. It's not that he was abusing. He said, I am certain that we can stretch this further. So he went that way until he figured out, till this point, I'm okay to do it. And he used to get it done from outside. He said, why should I? This car needs nothing. And his car ran beautifully. He still has it. He's done it up. And he's actually revamped the car altogether and continues to use it after doing all of that. So always think about that. You know what you think. So again, this is something that we enjoy, that we are taking good care of our vehicles. It gives us additional peace of mind. It gives us more satisfaction. But it's not necessary for you to do that. Just do the basics and you'll be well and good sorted.
I'll give you an example of how reliable cars can be. We got an invitation to go to Samir Kumar's wedding
Oh, of course.
in Jabalpur.
Okay.
We were in Mumbai. We were waiting to test the Palio diesel.
Oh, no. I know where this is going.
So Srini,
Can I preempt?
bol.
You've brought in an Italian, a long drive, and disaster.
No,
Potential.
there's no disaster. That's the best part.
I thought no engine oil.
There was no engine oil, and there was still no disaster.
There was still no disaster. Oh my god.
So Srini and I, we were driving up from Mumbai to Indore. Was the first day, and Indore to Jabalpur was the next day. We got out of Mumbai, and this car is running a little bit rough, and it refuses to go past, I think, 100 or 110 or some low number like this. It refused.
110.
It would not go past this. So when we stopped for the night, Srini is like, there's something wrong with this car. So we called Fiat, and we said, it's not running too well. Oh, are you stuck? No, we're not stuck, but it's not running too well. It was just serviced. We knew you were going to Jabalpur and the story and testing and all of that. So it's just been serviced. Next day, first thing, we come out of our hotel, the night stop, and we go to a petrol pump and we open the diesel, the filler cap of the engine oil, and fumes are coming out of it. In the drive from the hotel to the park, to the petrol pump, which is 2 kilometers. In 2 kilometers, it's smoking. White smoke is coming out of that. And there's guys like, sir, I don't think there's any engine oil left.
Oh my god.
So Srini is like, Srini has a particular language which I can't replicate. I'd love to, but I can't. So colorful language. Okay, fill it. So they topped up the engine oil.
How many liters went in?
All of it. There was nothing in the car. Literally nothing in the car. So it would have come with a super low amount of oil, or they would have taken it for service, taken the oil out, put a new filter. I think forgotten to put fresh oil, on which we went from Mumbai to Indore.
Whatever would be sitting in the galleys in the head, that's about it. Oh man.
So we filled up the engine oil, and the rest of the journey, the car became butter smooth. And Shini said, we should see how much faster it will go. Okay, 140 is smooth. Yesterday, 110 was a struggle. That car didn't break down on us or feel worse. And I think we went to Pachmadi or something along the way, the hill station, I think on the way back or something, because of the story and all of that.
It just ran. Oh my god, that's incredible.
Yeah. And we are talking about an Italian car here. It's not even like a Japanese thing. Nothing happened.
I can't believe that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's really amazing. And a diesel at that. Wow.
Yeah, it was a good drive. I mean, at least on the first day, it gave us lots to think about.
I thought there was going to be that, okay, let's see how fast it goes, and then the story will be like, uh-oh.
No, for that, you have a Pablo story, which I can't tell you in detail, but you should ask Pablo the next time you meet him, where he had to make a phone call to a manufacturer and say, the engine has fallen out of the car. And they said, what do you mean? Said, no, I mean, the engine is sitting on the ground. I can see it between the wheels. It's fallen out of the car. And then after the help came, they need to make a second phone call where he had said, I think they've blown the engine.
Oh my god. Pablo, we got to meet soon.
Yeah. So
Okay.
the point I think we wanted to both make is that it's not rocket science.
Mm.
And even if you're not on top of it 100%, not much is going to happen to your average vehicle today. And where there are flags, the flags will be obvious. Like there are certain brands, certain models where the reliability reputations are poor. If you intend to keep them for long, just don't buy those.
Mm.
And on our channel, at least, it's super clear as to what we think those machines are. But outside of that, regular maintenance plus common sense is basically all you need to keep vehicles around for as long as you like.
The only thing I'm going to reiterate over there, depending on your usage, how the wear and tear happens can be more or less. And that you should be careful about, because we've seen people try and drag on brakes saying, hurry, brake pads should be fine. But if you're a heavy user, if you're
Yeah.
not careful, if you're going on, you have your right foot on the brake, the wear and tear is going to happen. You're going to eat through disc brakes. You're going to eat through the discs, the pads. It will, of course, also upset your engine. So pay more attention to how you're riding,
Hmm.
uh,
Super point.
and you should be careful about how you use the vehicle in the smaller ways, because that can change what the maintenance requirement is. Like for instance, in our Ignis's case, like Vanita's thing is, I don't want to slow down for potholes.
Hmm.
I know our suspension has worn out faster than I would expect on an
Correct.
Ignis, but am I upset about it? No, because
No, and I think the key thing here is to recognize your own pattern and be aware of how you drive. It can sometimes give you an impetus to learn to do better, and sometimes it's just a matter of awareness. You don't have to change a thing. Like Vanita, for example, she drives just fine. She has this thing where I don't want to slow down for potholes. This adds up to a little bit extra maintenance on the suspension front, and if you're comfortable with that trade-off, which he is, why should be a
yeah,
worry at all?
I don't worry about it at all. I said you use it. There's enough ground clearance. The suspension will deal with it. We have to fix it earlier. That's fine. That's part of the calculation.
Yeah. No, and when I had the street triple, first service or second service, we're going to have to change our brake pads. Second service, brake pads? Why? Rear brake pads will be gone for sure. Rear brake pads will be gone for sure. I don't even touch that lever.
This is tram service.
Tram service. So what they were doing was they were making an assumption based on the usage pattern that they were seeing. And remember, a street triple is early superbike. So you're going in traffic, you're using all the acceleration, then you're using lots of brakes to slow down for traffic, then you're doing it again and again and again. So you are causing a lot of wear. If you're scared of the bike, a lot of people will also, instead of closing the throttle, they will bleed the clutch a little bit. And that's how they wear out clutches also.
Yeah.
So I'm like, if you're going to have to change brake pads, it'll be the front. I would be surprised if my rear brake pads look anything other than new. And when they started working on the bike, they realized that that was actually the case. My fronts were 20% gone or something ridiculously low number like that, and my rear was basically brand new. And then I knew that I use clutches, for example, really, really sparingly. So my Ducati's clutch at 60,000 kilometer felt new to the point where the service advisor said, "Why are you changing clutch plates outside? You should be doing it with us."
That's 60K.
And I said,
Wow.
I haven't done anything to my clutch. My KTM clutch is still all. I think we changed it as a precaution 5,000 kilometers ago, and it's about 32 or something. No, 40-ish now. 38 or something it is now. Something.
That's incredible.
Right? So I know that my pattern is that I don't abuse my clutches too much. I know that my pattern is my front disc brakes pads will wear a lot. My rear discs will not wear a lot. Now I know the pattern. The pattern is if my front lasts say 9,000 kilometers, then my rear will last 18,000 kilometers. But I'm aware of how I drive and ride now. So I can predict what's going to happen next. So if I'm going on a long trip and I'm at this 9,000, 18,000 point, I just go to the guy and give him the brake pad and say, might as well replace it. I'm going for a long trip.
Right.
And if there's 2,000 kilometers left on the old disc brake, I'll leave it in my tank bag as a backup. Saying if something happens to this new brake pad, I have a backup set that will get me home. We are good. You don't need more than this. It's the same. I get a lot of queries saying which spark plug to put, which oil to use, which brake fluid brand is better than the other one. Should you flush an engine? Honestly, you don't need to worry about any of these things. To me, the most tested fluids available are the ones that the OEM has already put. You may not agree that they're the highest quality possible, and I'm not saying they are. I'm saying they are the most tested. They are the most validated fluids available. So my bike for the longest time has run whatever the manufacturer happens to put in it. I refuse to spend brain power on this. Is it synth? Is it semi? Is it mineral? I don't care. Did it come from Rakesh Chemicals? Did it come from Castrol? Did it come from Shell? Honestly,
Honestly,
I
if
don't
tomorrow
care.
Suzuki tells me put chocolate fudge in the busas,
I'm okay.
I'll put it.
Yeah.
Full stop.
Right?
They've done the processing. I'm okay.
And to me, what I'm trusting is the fact that the OEM spends the most amount of time validating that their vehicles will be reliable. And it does raise a question about how much do you trust which brands. And obviously, the conventional wisdom is the Japanese are the most thorough. It's not like the Indians are bad. The Chinese are regarded as even worse than this. So in that sense, we are not doing too badly. And the Europeans sit somewhere in that scale, etc. And you can figure out your comfort level. My point is, will I change a spark plug because iridium and 4 prongs? Not really. I'm not at a racetrack, and that delta of 2% performance or whatever I'll get makes no sense to my life.
2% is also too much. For
I
just
don't, I don't care. It's
Yeah.
not important. What spark plug is recommended, put that spark plug. We are done with spark plugs. Until the manual says, okay, now it's on the Ducati, I think it's at 30,000 kilometers, you change all spark plugs. Desmo service, it's part
Right.
of it. We'll change it. When they took out the timing belt of the Ducati at Desmo service, which is an expensive part, it looked okay. Yeah, but it says change it, change it. I'm not going to mess with it. I'm going to come back 15,000 kilometers later and then have the engine opened again to change one timing belt.
Correct.
Today is the day to do it because the manual says do it. This is how they validated the reliability of this machine.
Correct.
We will follow that schedule. Do you want to go to a higher grade of oil? Why? Why are you wasting money? I would rather you run a higher grade of fuel instead. And that too intermittently so that the additives can clean your injectors a little bit. But I'm quite happy to, if the manufacturer doesn't say this requires speed power type additive grade fuels, I am not putting it. But Zubin says, for example, he sees a benefit, my mechanic. Zubin says, I see a benefit if every 2, 3, 4 months, you put one full tank of additive fuel, run that tank out and then go back to running normal fuel. So that if there is any gumming, anything, the detergents in that premium grade fuel will wash those off.
Correct.
That's it. When I don't use a machine very regularly, which happens if I'm traveling a lot, then I will remember that at next service, I will want them to ultrasonic clean the injectors out. So that if there's any gumming from the standing, we are covered. But this is all essentially common sense. What do you do? Do you do any of this?
Sorry, I've chosen my vehicle so that I don't have to even think about any of this. The Busa, the battery's been low for the last 1 year, but it still cranks every time.
Yeah.
It's just, okay, now I'm living with it. I haven't been riding it much, so I'm a little guilty about that. But now the battery needs to change. But despite that, the last time it came to office, it's been ages. Since then, I haven't changed the battery. Genuinely, I haven't even ridden the bike.
Yeah.
I still go down every other time expecting that it's not going to crank up.
Yeah, it's like a polite ninja, okay? It threatens to not start every single time. And then it says, okay, fine. And then it starts up.
And then just use it. I just run it around a little bit, park it again. And it's done. Like I've literally done nothing with the bike.
Yeah.
And the last time I thought, okay, the tires will be low on air, the battery, it's not going to start up. This is going to happen. Just when they started, go. Okay, rode it for 15 minutes, came back, parked it again.
Yeah, during the COVID days, lockdown, you should go start your bike every day was a big conversation. Honestly, I didn't go down for like 6 weeks. Right? I had an arrangement with my neighbors and we were sharing resources and they would use, I think, my kitchen or my help and then they would buy the supplies. So I didn't really have to leave home, was basically. I didn't start my bike for 6 weeks. And when I went down 6 weeks later and I started, they all started.
Right.
And I let them idle for 10-15 minutes. I switched them off and went right back up. Everything started.
You had the lithium on it? No.
The lithium was only... No, the 210 had a lithium battery. The other bikes were lead acid. They all started. They all idled quite happily. I had a little tire inflator at home. So I rotated the tire a little bit so the pressure point is moved. I reinflated them to spec, went back home and forgot about them for another 6 weeks. 6 weeks later I came back. They all started.
So I think there's an interesting thing in this. He found out ways to work with whatever he had so that it works the way he wants. Like the 210 thing is, because 210 is like the Ducati also. The V4s require a little bit more energy to crank up, and the Aprilia is a little bit more sensitive. So with the lithium battery, that you don't have to think about it.
No, I'm very clear about this battery thing. Okay, if I have to replace a lead acid battery today, I will go to lithium straight because it solves so many issues on the long run. In the 210's case, I bought the used bike. It was 2 years old and that bike had been parked for a while because the 210 wasn't riding regularly. So the lead acid battery was weak. And when we were changing all the fluids, which I do whenever I buy a used vehicle, all fluids get changed. When he was changing the fluid, he said, battery is a little bit weak. It'll last 7 months, 8 months. No, I'm spending a block of money right now getting it up to speed. you do the lithium thing also and finish it off.
And now for me, like the Busa, it's 4 years old. Changing the battery should have been done 2 years ago. But just because I don't know how, but it's lasted. I mean, that's how I've chosen what works for me. So I don't have to think about the machine so much. The machine kind of takes care of itself a lot of the times.
Correct.
And that's what makes it so enjoyable for me.
Yeah.
So I mean, someday, which Italian would I have? I know.
What?
RSV.
RSV4, huh? They're awesome. These Aprilias
Yeah.
are just kick-ass.
RSV4.
Hmm.
Anyways, yeah. So yeah.
So you should buy the 457. RS4. So you only have to do V57, then you're done.
Actually, though, I really enjoyed riding that bike.
Yeah.
I thought it gave so much of the feel of the RSV4 in terms of the personality
The
that
handling.
it had.
Yeah. The front end is just like the RSV4s in the sense of that
The
confidence.
seating position, all of that.
yeah.
It was. But the question remains about the service. But they've still not started deliveries of it yet.
They have started deliveries.
Oh, they
Complaints have already started.
Oh, okay.
And it will take them time to stabilize. To me, it's a new system.
I think the main question in that case would be what parts availability. So even if you want to go outside somewhere to get the work done.
I don't think it's an unreliable bike.
Uh,
So I don't think parts availability is an issue as much as the service experience is a challenge. The Aprilia dealers have dealt with scooters and they've not dealt with scooter guys very well in the first place. So that jump to a 5 lakh rupee twin cylinder high performance motorcycle going to a completely new kind of customer with a new expectation. There's just so many levels at which they have to connect with their customers which is new to them. That to me first it has to break. And after the break only will it get fixed. Which is why I'd said as much as I love the bike, maybe you shouldn't buy it just yet. Maybe you should hold your horses, sit for 6, 8, 10 months. Let somebody else be the guinea pig for the process, not the bike, the process. And then go and jump it.
and reliability wise, it's not like.
I'm not anticipating trouble because it doesn't feel like the machine has any real strain pointed. It's just an effortless machine.
Okay, cool. Anything else?
No? What should we talk about next time?
La 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 la. Music.
I have an idea. I'll surprise you.
Oh, good. Works for me.
Yeah, works?
Yeah.
Done. Let's sign off then.
Okay. 3, 2, 1.
Disconnect.